All right, welcome to the Chason Laing podcast. We have amazing guests, interesting conversations. Don't really know where we're going to end up, but we're going to have a great time getting there. Before we get started, do us a favor and hit that little subscribe button and click the little notification bell to get access to our shows as soon as they drop. And if you don't mind sharing this on your social media channels, that would be amazing. Today I have a really fun guest. We go way back. He's a fellow filmmaker, Chris Florence. What's up, man? How you doing?
Hey, buddy.
Really glad to have you here.
Official, like that greeting, everything was like so official. It's like it's really polished.
I thought about running down your list of like IMDb stuff and be like, all right, he's done this and this, but like, no, we're not going to do that.
Nobody knows who I am. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Nobody knows who I am either. It's all good. No, but yeah, we do go back now. I don't know how long, but I met you at the first the first International Christian Film Festival I ever went to. I think is when I met you. And we had a lot in common, like right off the bat. And so I've kind of gotten to hang out with you ever since.
Garcia connected us.
Yeah, and I've already interviewed Jeannie. So it feels appropriate. This is episode number 10 for me. So I'm trying to do 100 people this year. Double digits. We're in double digits now, episode 10. So I'm pumped. I'm excited about this, man.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, so we're gonna get started, but first, just you're a filmmaker. You've done marketing videos, which I've had you on my marketing podcast already. We've talked about that. We're not gonna spend much time on that today, but you've been a filmmaker for quite a while, and I want to jump right in and just say, how did you end up even doing this to begin with? Because that's how I met you. But how did you end up there and where you are now?
It's kind of funny because I didn't go to school for film. I went to school for just business administration because I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. But I ended up in doing videos. It's kind of weird because like there was a website. I don't know if you ever heard of Sermon Spice.
Yes, that was the dream for a while back in like the early 2000s. Like get some on Sermon Spice.
Dude, I had like when there was hardly anybody on there, I had videos on there, and I was like selling so much. Like I was selling a ton of videos on there, and they were like really cheesy videos. Most of it was stock videography. It wasn't even like real good. It's like stock footage. That was back when I bought one of those old Canon. Remember the little mini DV recorder? Like it looked really legit. It had like a really long lens on the front of it, and a very small body, and it had like a little shoulder. I can't remember the model that was, but that was like early digital stuff. And anyway, so I was shooting a little bit on that, and I was selling stuff on Sermon Spice and basically I was making it for my church, and then I would put it on there to sell. And I think the first year I was selling on there, I think I made like 12 grand or something. And I'm like, oh my gosh, too bad.
That's ridiculous, man. That's awesome.
And I remember thinking, I'm making these little no-name videos that are like, I don't know, they were 30 seconds to like 2 minutes length. And people were paying like $20 for these videos. And I'm thinking to myself, now you can either go to the store and buy a Hollywood produced feature film for $15. Or you could buy my 2-minute thing that I don't know what I'm doing for $20. And I just remember being like, the economy doesn't seem quite right, but I'm going to make money whenever, as much as I can. But then the market got flooded with videos, and nobody could find me anymore. And there was no way for people to really, there was no like, hey, I'm going to follow this filmmaker because I really like his work. It was just kind of like throw it against the wall. And most of it was trash, and including some of my stuff. But I tried doing the best I could with what I did. So I started there, and then it kind of progressed into, I was trying to figure out how do I make money other than that, because that went away. And so I started integrated into a marketing company that I had. So I was building websites and I was doing video, and it was about half and half. And probably about 3 years ago, I got just kind of so burnt out on web development that I just went straight to commercial videography. 100% of what I do is that. And so that kind of brings you to today.
Yeah, man, I remember the Sermon Spice boom. I really wanted to get in on that, but there was all kinds of, at the time I was working at a big mega church in Dallas, and we were making some original stuff, but then there was the whole, who owns it, who gets to make money, who gets to post it. And as anyone in the industry knows, the filmmaker is always going to get screwed in that regard. And so that never really happened. But man, yeah, we would buy stuff on Sermon Spice all the time because churches don't care. They're just like, sure, spend $20-$30. Now, if you go and ask them, hey, I want to make a film, would you give me $20? Then you're, oh my gosh. You know, do you have a business plan? Show me your business plan.
That's so funny. I never thought of it that way.
Oh, we need something for, Pastor Gary as he's getting up there to do something. Give him a countdown. It's only $50. No problem. Throw it at them.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. All right. So this is a tangent. I might have some inner rage. I don't know. But anyway. I do. I probably do. So let's talk about so when I met you, you were, I don't think you had done this yet. But I think we're starting it. I think you did it after I originally met you, but you made a time traveling film called Forward. It's a short film, but it was pretty impressive.
It's a feature.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a feature film.
Feature.
It's short feature. How many minutes was it? 70, 80, 90?
It was just at the bare minimum. It was, I think it was 70 minutes, I believe. I mean, it was just barely over enough to be able to be considered a feature film.
Right. Well, I watched it and I remember thinking what I appreciated about it was your set design was really good. Your lighting was really good. Your cinematography was really good. And you had an interesting enough story where I was like, okay, what is going on? I'm watching this thing. So how did that come to be? And just tell me a little bit about it. Cause it was kind of fascinating to see your set design was really good. You actually built a time machine. It was so good that when I needed to pitch a time travel show to, I think it was Lionsgate. I was pitching that. I can't remember, but I actually used some of your artwork in my pitch to kind of paint the picture for what I was thinking. Cause your artwork your set design was so good that it was impressive, legit. So tell me about that.
So we started off, it was an idea from my DP that I was working with. And he said, hey, I have this idea but it wasn't a story. It was just literally like a premise. And so, I was working with a guy who was helping me write, but he was a book author kind of writer. And so he didn't really get screenplay as much because he would do a little bit more description and he would also write things that I'm like, dude, you understand? We don't have the budget for this. He's writing time travel where there's happening in the 1950s and some going you literally have to have period set design, period, costume wardrobes and stuff but he's not thinking that way. So I've had to kind of think like a producer more. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll try my hand at writing. And so I wrote the story. And then I would sit down with my DP and I'd be like, hey, this is the direction I want to head. What are you thinking about this? And so the story just kind of got bigger and bigger. And it started off as we're going to just do a short film. And it's funny that you call it a short film because that's literally what it was started out to be. And then we put all this time and money into building the set. And we're like, dude, it just seems like we got all this stuff here. Yeah. Let's just film more.
Well, it looks so good. You're like, man, I kind of want to stretch that out,
Yeah. So we just had to milk it because we put so much time and we built this thing in the middle of the summer and it was in a garage and a friend's garage and he didn't really have any power. So my dad was an electrician and he helped us run power out to the garage. And so we had power, but we still didn't have an AC. And we're trying to film this. We're in Florida in the hottest part of the year. It was end of July, 1st of August. And I'm like, what are we thinking? There's no way we're going to be able to film in here without passing out and all of our actors being just pouring sweat. And so we built it out of MDF. It was just a bunch of Home Depot stuff, MDF stuff. Anything you can find at Home Depot is what we built it with. And then we found extra parts. So we went around town asking different computer places, hey, do you have old motherboards that you're throwing out? Because we just want to collect a bunch of junk. And so we were wanting a kit bash. I don't know if you are familiar with that terminology. Have you ever heard kit bashing?
No, not really.
So kit bashing is taking existing products and creating something new. They do a lot of that in the toy world. So they'll take a bunch of toys and they'll pull them all apart and then they'll rebuild it into something else. And then they'll paint it and everything to make it look
Sounds like something horrifying out of Toy Story.
Yeah. So
Toy Story 5.
Yeah. So people Adam from that show. What was it on Discovery Channel? Mythbusters. Adam Savage, is that his name? And he was like a guy who did just kit bashing, like that. Anything like any of the Star Wars stuff, that was all kit bashing. Anyway, so we took a bunch of parts and we put it all on this MDF board, and then we needed it's kind of funny because like we were just taking whatever people would give us for free and taking it apart and being like, okay, what can we use this for? And we needed some plexiglass for the door. In the door, plexiglass we realized was expensive. I didn't realize that until we started looking. And then my buddy found like 20 computer monitors for sale, and on like Facebook Marketplace, they wanted like $25 for like 20 monitors or something. It was crazy. And so we decided to take one of the monitors apart because we were using it for like the fake server rack. We needed a few working monitors for that. And so we had all these extra monitors. And so we just started taking them apart, seeing what was inside. And I didn't realize that like LCD monitors have like really thick plexiglass inside of the screen. So when we found that, it was like almost the perfect size to build into the door of the time machine so that you could actually see inside of it. And so we ended up using, reclaimed materials for the most part. We went to the dollar store and lined the inside of it with those reflectors you put in your car window, for hot days and stuff. We just took a bunch of those and stapled them all together and like lined the inside of the time machine with that. And then we just had like an LED. We had 2 tube LEDs that we got from Home Depot for like $10 or something, and put those inside of the time machine so it could be illuminated from the inside. So, I mean, it was just like a lot of just problem solving and a lot of just really crazy stuff. My dad worked for a car wash place, and they had a bunch of old like boxes that were just in a junkyard behind the guy's house where he lived. And we were like, hey, can we go back there and look for stuff for the time machine? And he was like, yeah, you can have whatever you want back there. And so we went in there and grabbed a bunch of stuff. We showed it to the guy in a pile when we got done. It was like a picking kind of a expedition. And he looked at it all. I was like, yeah, you can have all that stuff. I was like, sweet. So we used some of it for the time machine. Some of it was just, my dad rewired some of the fuse boxes and made the little light things glow inside.
Right.
I wanted to keep one of those. I don't think I ended up keeping one. I'm trying to remember what I did with it. I think I ended up selling them online or something. But yeah, just a bunch of stuff like that. And then, but we wanted to be able to like have him be able to turn switches and lights to happen. So if he was interacting with these props, they would actually like respond to his stimulus, whatever he was doing to it. And then, so we just kind of did all that. I ended up buying a window unit to be able to we basically lined the whole garage with like plastic and had like a window unit to cool off the space. And then, so in between takes, we'd turn that thing on, try to get it running for a while. And then we were ready for the next take. We'd turn it off, film, because we didn't want the noise.
Right.
We'd film. And then, but so it's like back and forth like that. We filmed some in the house itself. So it was like mostly a one location kind of a film. So what people don't understand, like filmmakers don't realize, I've seen so many scripts where there's like 50 different locations for the script. And I'm going, do you understand like what you're doing to yourself and your crew and in your budget when you have this many locations? Like it takes a lot, right?
Right.
I mean, tell me about your show. Like you filmed in a baseball stadium, an actual baseball stadium. Was the Rangers, right?
Well, I filmed in the Rangers and I filmed in the Frisco Rough Riders stadiums. Both stayed. It's kind of a long story. We started out in the Rangers stadium, then that became problematic, and so we had to kind of switch it mid-shoot with the Rough Riders.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, I know exactly
you
what
got to
you're
get permits and all that stuff.
It's a huge pain. Like you have to work at it, and even after you worked at it, we still had issues down the line of different people changing. Like you think you have the right person, and they sign off on everything and take your money, and then somebody else comes along and is like, we don't know if we can do that. I'm like, you already took my money. We already done. We left. Like it's been 3 weeks. And so we had so many weirdo things that happened that was like, I don't know what's happening anymore. I just know they took my money, so I guess we're gonna go with it. So, but yeah, there was a whole level of, you're right on to something. Like the locations, people, I think there's two kinds of writers. There's the kind of writers that have the luxury of just writing whatever they think in their brain, and it can be whatever, you know, they can go Christopher Nolan size. They don't have to think about putting that together. And then there's the people like, you know, you and me who are thinking, you got to figure out, like, you know, I don't write anything into a script until I already have access to a thing. Right. You know, even my children's show, like we had to, I wanted to write in a plane where we had a G6 style plane, you know, a private commercial plane that was really cool. And I was like, I'm not going to write this in the script until I know that we can get access. So we found access, got one, and only then did I write it into the script, because I'm like, I'm not going to write myself into a hole. But then every time you do a set change, it's more time. You got to drive there. You got to set up your lights. You got to set up your actors. You got to block everything. Got to rebuild the camera, put it all there. And by the time you've done that, you know, you're there for 4 hours. You just can't do that over and over and over 100 times. Right. So you really have to be extremely efficient. And if you're shooting more than 2 locations in a day, that's extremely impressive. Like, I don't even know. I don't even know if I did that. But typically, you know, you're shooting at one spot in a day. So yeah, you don't want to write 50 scenes. That's ridiculous. So anyway, but I love that about Forward, because it was, your set design was so good that it wasn't boring. You know what I mean? It's like, it was so good that it was captivating. Like, it looked like a real day. It was one of the most impressive things that I'd seen from any kind of indie filmmaker, where, you know, it had better set design than some of the Star Trek stuff that I've seen. You know, they got the little board up there and it's like, here's a bunch of little glowy lights. They turn around like, Captain, we've got this thing over here. And it's like, right. You know, but your thing was like, that thing could actually take off. Like, it looked legit. So anyway. Yeah,
we were using like a little smoke machine to kind of simulate like different, you know, stuff coming from, like, we tried to build like a system that didn't end up working. It was like PVC pipe that went under a platform underneath the time machine. And then we basically had a hose coming from the fog machine. It was just one of those cheap, you know, Halloween fog machines that we got at like Spirit Halloween or something. And it had a hose going into it. But for some reason, it was collecting too much moisture once it started traveling through the tube. And the moisture started preventing the fog from coming through. So what we ended up doing is just unhooking it from the thing we spent so much time building into it. And we just shot the fog underneath the platform in a simpler way. And it worked fine, you know?
Yeah. Well, I love that kind of stuff though. Like that, you know, for me, it kind of reminds me, we had this, on Breakers, we had explosions, and obviously I couldn't actually do the explosions, but I needed some reference point to see like how would an explosion look in the camera. So I basically rigged 4 different giant PVC apparatus things that were like 8 feet long, and they were basically air compression tanks. And so you would max them out at about 70 PSI. And then at the end, I attached a sprinkler head with a valve. And then there was like a little PVC like opening thing. And you would put like flour. I think I used flour. You put flour in the end of it, pack it up there. And then when you're ready, you turn, like originally it was a button, but the button, I had all kinds of problems with, you know, doing it right. So you would just turn the valve and then that air would just blast that thing out there. And so we could actually do it in a scene. And in the film, you can kind of see some of that, like it actually put dust in the space, which was cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
But we were able to, like, the big thing is to put the explosion frame rate match with the actual, you could see where the air would be, you know, like how fast that would move through the air. And that gave us a reference point to how to make the explosions look a little better than
That's
jump.
Interesting.
But I mean, it was totally like, you know, like ghetto. Like it was the most, like, it was just this, people saw me lugging these things around. Like, is that guy bringing a bomb in? What is that
I know,
thing?
right?
So it was ridiculous, but it worked, you know, and I think
awesome.
that's the best part of filmmaking is when you make weird things that work.
Yeah. And I think that's probably some of the best memories that I had from the shoot was just trying different things and seeing what worked. And when things didn't work, it was okay. We had to like try to figure out how to make it work. We did another thing where I wanted to do explosions and I say explosions, but I wanted to have like an overload happen to the machine, but I didn't want to like add it in post, the sparks and stuff coming off the wires and everything. Yeah. So I did some research and I found this website in Kentucky. And they sold like, it was for stage plays mostly. And it was like live pyrotechnic, but it was very like just sparks and stuff. Like, so if someone like pulls down like there's one of those big things to turn on power and, you know, it'll spark or whatever. It was just those kinds of things. And so I was asking the guy, you know, I was buying the material and he said, you can either buy it this way But if you buy it this way and it's already put together, when we ship it, we have to put a bunch of insurance on it because of, it's just more dangerous but if you buy all the individual components and we mail it to you, it doesn't cost, we don't have to do insurance. And so he really kind of helped me with some of that. And I think I spent like $60, $70 on, like, he sold me like wire, and it had like these it had like a little thing for like doing it's a button, and it just had a piece of wire on it, and you connect it to the thing, and then you hit the button, and then you put the button, and then it's also connected to a battery. So I put a 9-volt battery and a button and another piece of wire, and it created the spark. And there was like it's like that flash material, the stuff that the magicians use whenever they like do something, and then like they do their hand in the air and like this flame happens, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's a flame out of nowhere. Well, yeah, it's actually like a piece of paper that is like kind of flammable. And so you take this paper and put it on the wire along with this powder that was the sparks. It's kind of like the sparkler material, but just like the gray granules, like it's like a gunpowder stuff. And you just put that into a plastic wrapped bag in the end of the wire, and you wrap it tight. And then when you hit it and it explodes, it kind of pops because that plastic is like tight on there. And so like I tried to make this whole like apparatus thing. I bought like this really cool, like it was like I just bought like a fishing tackle box. And I bought more of those buttons on Amazon because I'm thinking I can replicate this and just have like a bunch of explosions happening all the time. Like I just hit different buttons on this thing. And for some reason it didn't work. I think it was like the length of my wire. I don't know much about electricity. So I was like, I think I don't have enough power. Like I think it's running out of steam by the time it gets to the actual thing that's supposed to ignite. Yeah. So the longer the wire was, I think the less power it was getting to it. That's my theory. Yeah. If there's anybody who's an electrician listening to this, like that has nothing to do with what he's talking about. Yeah, probably not. But anyway, it didn't work. And so I had to go back to the original button that I bought from the guy with the wire. And I had to stand behind the time machine while it was being filmed. And I had to like hit the button, and then we'd have to yell cut. And I think I got 2 pops out of each button push. And then we would yell cut, we'd change the angle. I'd set up different places for different sparks, hide behind the thing, hit record, do it again. And then we just like put it all together. And then it looks like there was all this like chaos happening. But
that's the one thing that you can learn from indie film right there is if you think it's going to go correctly, it will not. It never will go correctly. Not a single day ever. You will have to figure it out on the fly and go with it. So yeah, I feel you on that. I feel you on that, man. I'm having PTSD just thinking about it. Oh my gosh. Nothing worse than the pressure of trying to make something work when you've got like, 20 people around waiting on this thing to roll action. And you're like, I've got this one thing, and you're playing, please God, let it work. let it work, please.
And then it doesn't.
Oh man.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Fortunately, most of the time I've had success. Sometimes, there's been some serious failures, but that is the fun of it. You have all these hilarious stories about what works and what didn't work, but
that's true.
Anyway, all right. Well, so let's move on from forward a little bit. You're also one of the few filmmakers I know who actually worked on a Super Bowl commercial. And since we just had the Super Bowl here a few weeks ago, tell me a little bit about that. Now, I didn't play in the Super Bowl in the end, but it was supposed to play in the Super Bowl, and it was a big deal. Tell me about that.
That was a pro-life thing. There were some bigger names attached to it, but they were like kind of trying to hide their identities. But I was told by the person in my direct report, like, these are the people who are involved. And I was like, oh, those are pretty big names. Well, basically it was a project about people who survived abortions. And basically they had like deformities, a lot of them. Like there was one guy who had like a shriveled arm. And actually I shot in Texas. That was the interview I did in Texas where you let me use your gear.
Oh, that's right.
Whenever I was standing with you in Texas. And so I met him down at the college. Which college was it again?
Man, I don't know. There's UNT, UTA.
Seminary.
There's SMU. There's the Dallas Seminary. There's Southwestern Seminary. There's a bunch of schools here.
Didn't you go to it? Isn't it the same seminary you went to?
I don't know where you filmed. I went to Dallas Seminary, Dallas Theological Seminary.
I think that was it. I think that's where I went. Anyway,
there you go. Shout out.
Is it downtown Dallas?
It's in downtown Dallas. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I went. And this guy, I interviewed with him. Anyway, I went and they flew me around, and there were a lot of people with a lot of heartbreaking stories about just how they were deformed and from unsuccessful abortions. And so they wanted to run this pro-life thing in the Super Bowl. And we had a ton of issues, but we got through them all. And then we were told by the person who, she was like head of the review board, I think is what they called them. So they reviewed all the commercials, and then they said, okay, we'll let these get through, and these other ones just, you know, they don't match our brand or whatever. Maybe they've got another sponsor that this might be stepping on their toes. Anyway, she was like an attorney out of New York, and she told us, or she told our media buyer, because we were dealing through a media buyer, and the media buyer should have been enough to get us a spot on because she sold spots from there before. Yeah. And so it's not like we just walked in the door to the Super Bowl. Oh, we want to do a commercial with the Super Bowl. And I think the amount of money that they negotiated was like $2.5 million for a 30-second commercial. Yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, we could do like, as a filmmaker, I'm thinking you could make like 4 really good films for that, and they all could be pro-life films. Yeah. You know, it's like, why are we spending this much money on a 30-second commercial? Anyway. And so the woman told us that it was in review. We'll come to find out she buried it. Like, it never went to review. Like, we didn't even get that far. Yeah. We were being told that it was being reviewed. And then they were like, oh, sorry, it's past the deadline, which we got the commercial in there like way before the deadline to get stuff in there. And they were like, oh, well, you were in line and there were too many people in line and they just didn't get to, just kept coming up with all kinds of excuses. Well, I told the girl we're working with, I was like, you know, you might actually get more attention. I mean, people watch 30-second commercials and don't pay any attention to it. You might get more attention with it not getting to the Super Bowl than getting into the Super Bowl. If they were smart, they would have just let it play and nobody would have said anything and nobody would have done anything. Yeah. But since she blocked it, it became like headline news for a week, you know? And so it was actually a lot of the major pro-life outlets were reporting on it. And then the film, supposedly, I don't know how true this is, but supposedly Donald Trump watched the film or the 30-second commercial. I don't know if I have no proof for that.
He said it was great. It was fantastic. It was the best thing he'd ever seen. It was wonderful. It was great.
Best pro-life commercial he's ever seen. I guarantee it.
It was. No doubt.
But it was played at the March for, what's it called? Did they call it the March for Life?
Yeah, I think that's right.
They do like a march thing through Washington. And then it was like on a big Jumbotron and stuff like that. So I thought that was kind of cool, you know, that I could be a part of a project that I believed in, but I also felt like got a lot more attention than most of the stuff that I've worked on. Right. Including my feature film. Yeah.
Well, welcome to the club, buddy. It's a warm club. Exactly. We like everybody in it. But that's awesome. No, that's cool. So it's still a great experience and it's a good story. And, you know, I'm not super surprised. I'm sure they were like, hey, we're going to play Doritos and we're going to play Old Spice. And then between that, we've got this anti-abortion commercial. And I'm sure someone was like, nah, we're going to get rid of that. Put in some other kind of just fluff and stuff thing, which ironically, what we really should be learning. Did you watch the Super Bowl this like week? What is it? 2 weeks ago now? Did you watch the Super Bowl?
I mean, you know me, we're opposites in that way. Like, I hate sports. Like, I'm like, what's the Super Bowl? I don't know.
It's like my wife. She didn't like the Super Bowl either. But so my family, we don't really we don't have time in truth to watch much of the football. But when it comes down to those last few weeks of the playoffs, then the kids and I and my wife, you know, Cassie, she'll make bets. We'll make bets on the different teams, who's going to win and so on. So it's like a family event now, which is fun. Right. So we did watch the Super Bowl because we all make bets, and so that's what makes it fun now. and it's mainly for gloating rights. So, like my kids are not rolling in cash. They can't really make bets. But the QR code commercial that came out, like that was a solid minute of just.
Yeah, I saw that one.
It's just bouncing around. And if anybody can learn anything like that, the second I saw that, I turned around my wife. I was like, this is the most genius thing I have seen on a Super Bowl commercial. This is better than anything I've ever seen in a Super Bowl commercial right here. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like this is amazing. And so all your hard work and stuff like that for your commercial would just pale. Like we all need to learn something from that simple QR code. Anyway, but we're not going to talk about that.
All I could think about was that episode of The Office. Like
with you're hoping it lands in the corner.
Yeah. Did you see that one?
Yes.
It was like they're waiting for it to hit the corner. And then like you got, Michael Scott's up there doing his thing and he's like talking and it's happening right behind him. And so everybody's like enthralled by this TV, but he's thinking it's like his speech and he's killing it.
Yeah. Well,
and then it finally hits the corner and everybody's like, yeah. And then they all like just.
And he's like, man, I've really motivated them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I could think about when I saw that QR code thing. I was like, that's pretty funny.
Well, I got to do a whole podcast just on that QR commercial, and the genius of it. But anyway, we're going to move on. So you and I met I think the first time we met was at ICFF. I think you actually met my wife first that year because she came out and was doing networking before I could come. And she actually told me, she's like, I met this guy named Chris. You've got to talk to him. You and him have a lot in common. And I was like, okay, sure. Like I'm a unique flower here, buddy. So I was like, there's nobody like me. And then I got there. Yeah, you and I have a lot in common. And so we ended up having a conversation there because we're at a Christian film festival. And yet it's extremely, if you ever want to know how to put the finger on one of the main problems in Christian film, go to a Christian film festival because you immediately come into contact that here's 1,000 people showing up for this festival and everyone's talking about quote unquote Christian film and no one is talking about the same thing. And so like how they define what makes a Christian film, each person has their own thing. And so I thought that would be a great conversation point to talk about is like, how do you define for you Christian film? Like what makes it a Christian film?
Well, first of all, I don't think films can be Christian. Only people can be Christians, but films can't be Christian. It's just a film. It's like I don't understand. I want to get like down to brass tacks of what the Bible truly says. It's like, oh, I got a Christian car. It's like what?
Yeah. And this is why nobody likes us at those festivals, man.
So to me, I'm definitely not the right person to ask because I'm in the minority. I think we're both definitely in the minority. It's like we're kind of stuck in between worlds. Like, we feel like we kind of like we really enjoy films that Hollywood makes, while not as many as they used to. It's gotten really preachy. But the thing I find interesting about the newer Hollywood films is, have you ever noticed that, like, how preachy Christian films can be?
Yep.
Well, Hollywood has become equally as preachy.
Oh yeah. And everybody hates those films too. It's like learn a lesson.
And everybody hates those films. So it's like, so were they watching how Christians are making films? Being like, that's how we need to make film. But it's like, what? Anyway, that's just kind of a side thought. But as far as Christian films go, my definition of Christian films is pretty broad. I would say the movie Signs was probably pretty Christian in the way that it was presented. He was Catholic, but other than that, like the crisis of faith aspect of that film, I thought was more compelling than any labeled Christian film that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
I would say, as far as that particular movie goes, but I think that that's the whole problem is that you're recognizing an element in the writing that has Christological aspects in it or faith aspects in it. Right. And they point to things that, can rub your spirit in the right way, saying like, this is true. Like people have this all the time. You can struggle with your faith all the time. This is a normal thing. Hard things happen. People struggle with faith. And that's so like that resonates with you when you're watching that film. now is that film quote unquote Christian? You know, that's the whole thing. When, you know, that for me, that was one of the most enlightening things about, you know, I've now been to probably more Christian festivals than most people. Like I've been all over the country, even outside of the country for Christian films at this point. And I've run into this every single one, is everyone defines it so differently. Some people are like, it's not a Christian film until there's the Roman road spoken out in it. Some people say that it's not a Christian film until somebody's converted and there's a prayer and like, Jesus, take over my life moment, you know, like that has to be in it if it's going to be a Christian film. And it's just so broad. On the other hand, there's the people on the other wing that say, you know, if a Christian makes a film, in essence, it's a Christian film because their worldview will be imprinted into the film. And so you have all these different viewpoints on it. And what I find the most fascinating is that in the Hollywood genre, you know, this doesn't exist, right? Like there's just like, they're making movies on, you know, they might be preachy in their film. They might want something on it, or they might just make action or put whatever they want in the film. But at the end of the day, they're just doing whatever hopefully will make them money. But in the Christian realm, you've got this huge swath of people in this niche realm, and they will fight each other. It's like they don't all just get behind it, you know, for any reason. Like this group will get behind this or won't get behind this, and this group won't get behind that because it's not Christian enough, or it's too Christian, or on and on. And they almost like beat each other up over it. And it's a weird thing. And I find it funny because I always ask people, what do you think makes a Christian film a Christian film? And it's a very I think it's always divisive in a sense, because people define it and then the next person's like, no, you're wrong. You know, Chris, you're wrong. You're crazy to think that. If they don't say Jesus in it, if there's not a prayer moment, if they don't go and sit under that oak tree, Kendrick Brothers style, and pray to Jesus, this is not going to be a Christian film, and you've failed miserably, and Jesus is not going to be happy with you. And anyway, so it's a crazy thing. It's a bizarre thing.
It really is. If you ever want to like post in a Christian like filmmakers forum, like on Facebook groups or something like that, and you really want to get a conversation started, that's basically the question that you ask, like, what makes a film Christian?
Oh man.
And it, like you said, it'll be like every different answer you can think of, and people are fighting about it, you know. And
well, I won ICFF one year for my TV series. And I was so excited, like for that just brief glimmering moment, I was excited. I was like, man, oh my gosh, I won something. This is great. And then I had this guy come up to me at the film and he's like, you know, you really need to, just because you can put something violent in the movie doesn't mean you should. You really need to think about what honors Jesus in this moment. And like, you know, you don't have to go to the dark side, quote unquote. And then he left, and it was like, okay, you know, yeah. So I was just,
he hasn't read the Bible, has he?
Oh man,
I mean, the Bible's pretty bloody.
And but like, it was enlightening to me. It was enlightening to me because on the one hand, I can recognize this person's good intentions. On the other hand, I'm like, that's when I realized like the naivety of my brain kind of started. I realized you're never going to make all these people happy. You're never going to be all playing on the same team. It's impossible to do this. And so my brain I had a mental, you know, awakening in that moment for that. But anyway.
No, I'm with you. I mean, I went into it kind of the same way, where the only reason I started making films that the only reason I started making narrative stuff was because I wanted to make something that honored God, but also wasn't like overly preachy, and it wasn't like the typical Christian film, and which is why I decided to make a science fiction film. Because, you know, what's crazy about science fiction is like, it's one of the few genres that, I mean, even when you see like Ridley Scott's, like any of his alien films and stuff, he's always poking at this idea of this existentialism, and even pokes at Christianity and the religion, and like just religion in general. And of course, I don't think he's doing it in a good way. I think he's doing it to try to like ridicule it. But I feel like science fiction, like, it opens up so many doorways for people to talk about like a greater reality, like who God is, but being able to do it through like science. And so at some point, for whatever reason, like early scientists were Christians, like they were full on we're going to study science from the aspect and through the lens of Christianity, because we believe that God is great, and we believe that God has made a beautiful world that needs to be discovered and celebrated. But somewhere along the way, like, it got hijacked, and suddenly the Christians ended up being the people who are ridiculed for being science deniers, and basically saying that, like, and what's funny is, like, it almost feels like a lot of Christians have kind of like said, oh, they've almost like abandoned that world, the scientific community, to those that don't know Christ. And so it's like, why are you guys, I know there's plenty of scientists who are Christians, but it almost feels like the narrative has flipped. And now suddenly those who don't know God and deny the existence of God are the ones that are controlling the narrative when it comes to science. But when you look at science fiction, it seems like nothing is off limits. Like, you can talk about, subject matters like, what's it called when they're transcendental? No, not transcendental. When you, the idea that your consciousness can be taken from your human body and put into a computer. What is that called again? I can't think of the name, but it's a movement of these people who think that they're going to be able to live forever without having to go through Jesus to get to it. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, that to me is this interesting subject matter to tackle from a Christian standpoint. And it almost feels like in the Christian world, nobody wants to mess with that stuff. They just want to stick with one genre, which is drama. Yeah. Like, everything that they want to do is drama. And you might get for some reason, what is it with Christians? Maybe you can answer this question for me, because maybe you've thought about it. What is it with Christians and their romantic notions of the Wild West? Like, it's either going to be a drama or it's going to be a Western. What is that? Why is that?
So my guess on that, and I've had many a conversation with my wife about it, is that, so for example, if let's say you go up to a guy in the street right now and you say, hey, dude, on the street, let's have this conversation about religious faith, belief systems, all that kind of stuff, worldview. You're probably more than likely going to be, attacked. It's going to go awkward. It's going to be awry. People are not going to want that. And so if you want to try to tell them some sort of faith system, truth system, something in it, it's awkward. However, if you rewind the clock back 1800s, everybody was talking like this all the time. It was the reference point for a lot of conversations. And so therefore it can play out really, really easily. I mean, that's why Little House on the Prairie was able to do stuff like that, because it's the common language. People did not know the world any other way. Like, they would pray over their meals. They would, like, the faith system was a major part of society at that point, and it was so common that it's easy to write, it's easy to put it in there, and it's easy to kind of slip under the radar precisely because it's 1800s. And so if you're a modern day person watching that, you understand it. It just is like, it goes in and out. You don't really argue with it because you're like, oh, well, that's how everybody was. But if you try to take that same dialogue, you put it in the dialogue in today, and it's not going to work. People are going to be like, no way, people are never going to talk like that. The irony, of course, is that the Christians have figured out how to...
That sounds right.
Yeah, they figured out how to write it for the 1800s and 1700s, but they haven't figured out how to write it for today. And the reason why is because we're very different today in this kind of postmodern world, and this is a whole theological discussion we could have, but I feel like that's why it doesn't play out the same way here.
But then they try to do it in modern day, which would be... God's Not Dead, all 10. Isn't there like 10 movies or something right now?
I don't know. I think there are at least 5. There are at least God's not died at least 5 times.
So I think, I don't understand, like, it's funny because, like, I even listened to when at International Christian Film Festival, they had one of the original guys who funded the first one there. And he starts talking about, like, the amount of revenue each movie made. Right. And there was an obvious decline for every movie. And I think by that point, there was 3. This is before they made the more recent. Yeah. 4 or 5 or whatever. And I'm going, and I'm sitting there in my seat, like, trying not to bust out laughing, because I'm going, it's because nobody wants to see these movies. Why aren't you getting the clue? Why do you just keep making them? Yeah. It's like, oh, we see that money is less and less. But I guess they must be profitable enough that even though they see a decline in revenue, they're still profiting off of whatever.
Well,
they're doing. It's got to be
my view, and again, I mean, we got to get, 'cause that's a PureFlix audience there because they're the ones putting that out with David White. But what I would say is that they can invest whatever, $1 million, $5 million. I can't remember what their budget is for each one of those films. I think it dropped. I think they're below $5 million for the sequels. But they can drop $5 million on it. But people in the Christian realm, meaning like churches and stuff, they don't view it as maybe entertainment. They view it as like, this is a missions tool. We can grab our church, we can rent out this theater, we can put people, we can say, go see it for free, and they can go see the latest iteration of God's Not Dead, which is very going to be preachy, and there's an altar call moment in the films, and they're very purposeful like that. But it's a witnessing tool, and so the way that they're able to sell it, if you could spend $5 million and make 12, you would do it over and over and over again as well. So like as a business decision, it makes perfect sense why they're doing what they're doing, because they have a loyal audience that's going to see all of these movies like witnessing opportunities. Hey, I can't talk to Bob, my neighbor, this way, but I can definitely send him to a movie theater to see this, so I'm going to do that. And so then they do it over and over and over. But I think if you had to say, well, is this an actual entertainment film? Is that the end goal? I would say it's probably not, because their marketing strategy is not the same as like a Matrix movie or something like that. Like they're not aiming it at all at the same audiences or any of that stuff. So I think it's dramatically different. Anyway,
I just feel like going back to the conversation about the Westerns and how people talk, it's like when they decided to make God's Not Dead, the first one, and Kevin Sorbo is the bad guy.
He dies at the end because he was the bad guy.
He's literally a villain, like a villain twirling his mustache. Like it's the most cartoonish atheist I've ever seen in my entire. Like I don't even think this guy really exists in the real world. Like I didn't feel like they were fair with that. Like with the arguments were coming from him, it's like they were playing softball, with the audience, and they were it was a very unfair and unbalanced representation. I could get that happening from the world, where they always have the one Christian character and they're the most unloving, unchristian person you've ever want to meet, judgmental kind of people. But when it comes to how we represent ourselves and being able to reach out to the lost, we're held to a different accountability. We're held to a different level. It tells us that we're supposed to love our neighbors, and it doesn't specify, as long as your neighbor is a Christian, love them. It's telling us to love our neighbors, and that includes anyone who has different beliefs than us. And for you to try to villainize a person as an atheist, I'm like thinking to myself, if you're wanting to bring Christians to a theater, but then you're attacking that person once they get there, but because of their beliefs, I don't understand how they feel like that's sharing the truth in love. You know what I mean? So I would actually venture to say that God's Not Dead is actually not a Christian movie, because it doesn't treat people like God told us to treat people.
Yeah. I think that's very interesting.
And so, yeah. I'm kind of trying to bring it all back around, because you were like, what makes a Christian film a Christian film?
No, it's a very interesting perspective on it, because I understand what you're saying. I think, if I played I don't want to say the devil's advocate, because that's a weird context for this conversation, but at the same time, I would think, these days we've gotten very passive about, faith. Talking about faith in our culture is very like viewed as a no-no. Like you're supposed to not do that. It's like bad. And so what they're doing with these films is they're presenting arguments in these films, and they're making it easy for you to send somebody to, so your personal responsibility to talk to your neighbor is alleviated, because you can just send them to a movie or buy them a movie or give it to them. And so look, you did your quote unquote witnessing work. And I think that there's a lot of people, I think, that view it that way. It's just an easy way to try to get your argument across. And I'm sure maybe I don't have the studies to show this, but I'm sure it's changed some people's lives from watching it. So on that regard, great. I think that's fine. At the same time, I think that you're right. I mean, you're designing an entire movie around an argument. It's not really story driven. It's argument driven. And they're going to put the whole movie within that capsule of this argument to present. And I think that whole series is basically in that same regard. And, the success of it depends on how you view it. If you're viewing it as a money-making success, I'd say it is, because they keep making them and they keep making money off of them. So they put in this much and they get this much. And so they'll just keep doing it. And if they're going to, I think if you're viewing success as entertainment value, or like, are we doing something masterful in this craft, then I think it's failing horribly, because no part of that show or any of the sequels that I've seen, I've only seen the first few, or the first three, no part of it, as any point of it, is it masterful. Like, the cinematography is not masterful. The sound is not masterful. None of it is masterful. But I don't think that's their goal. I don't think that's their point, and I don't think that's their business plan. So,
but I guess that's the thing that I really struggle with, is because when you read the story of Solomon's temple, when you have the best of the best, like Solomon brought in the best of the best, only the best of the best, to contribute whatever skill they had to masterfully like create this temple to glorify God with. And I mean, these were like, it talks about, like, if you ever read that account and read like all the types of materials that he bought was the best of the best and all these different things, it's like we're expected to present God with our best of our best. And I've heard the argument said, well, maybe some people just aren't they're at a different level than you are. Well, then they shouldn't be making a movie. They're not ready.
Yeah.
It's like, keep developing your craft. And then maybe one day keep making short films, keep doing this. I'm not saying that you suck and you need to go home and stop doing what you're doing. I'm saying get better. I'm saying stop saying it's good enough, because as long as I feel like God, and that's the other thing. It's like, oh, God has told me I need to make this movie. And I'm kind of like, I don't think I don't think so. I don't think that that's not what God does. It's like, I think he has more things important to do than to tell you need to make a movie.
Yeah.
I can tell you this. He's telling you he does tell us that we need to preach the gospel. And I know they were like, oh, well, I'm preaching the gospel through a movie. It's just like, yeah, but I mean, I honestly don't, God can use anything. I'm not saying he can't save people with silly movies, with bad movies. I'm not saying it at all.
Yeah.
But that should not be our guiding light on the decisions being made as we're making film, to say, well, God can use anything, so I'm going to give him trash. And this movie is not going to be masterfully done, to use the word that you mentioned, as God not dead. God's not dead. So that's the thing. And I'm offended for God. I'm like, why are you giving him trash? Like, I mean, when I was making that science fiction film, I knew that there was not going to be there was not going to be an altar call. There was literally one tiny line in that film that, like, my personal feeling about time travel is I don't believe that humans will ever be allowed to time travel, because I think that is something that is only reserved for God. And some people might say, well, that's a very limited view of the possibilities of science and the progress of science. It's like, it's not that it's impossible, more than I think that God just wouldn't allow it.
Right.
I think he's just like, you guys don't have what you need. You don't have the mental capacity to do that. And just like the Tower of Babel, where he had to stop whatever they were doing there. And so that story always kind of seems strange to me, where it's like, they're just building a tower. What's the problem, But there were other things going on there. And it just was, the narrative was really struck me as strange, is where God was like, he literally had a conversation with himself and said that if we don't do something, that these people will do whatever is in their mind to accomplish, they're going to accomplish it. And it's just like, that's a very interesting thing to be said, like to be recorded in the Bible. Like, it's just a very odd situation. And there's definitely more to it. And there might be some poetry there that's going on as well. But I think that for the most part, when you're looking at trying to make a film, and I'm telling a story of of this guy's wanting to time travel, but it had nothing to do with time travel. It had to do with forgiving your past. That's really what the story was about. It was about being able to get over the things that you've done, and which is a very biblical concept, where when Jesus forgives us of our sins, we're not supposed to dwell on those things anymore because they've been forgiven, that God's forgotten about them. God's not bringing them up.
Yeah.
The enemy might bring them up to try to basically tell us we should feel bad about it, but that's not God. And so that was the purpose of that film. And the narrative that I told was literally just a vehicle to tell that truth. Was I looking for someone to get saved from that film? No, I was doing it to honor God, though. I was making that movie to honor God. When we were building a time machine, I wanted it to be something that I felt like we put as much of our own energy and time that we possibly could, and the resources that we possibly could, to make that.
Yeah.
You know, could someone make it better? Of course, of course. You know, but we worked really hard on it, and we didn't try to make shortcuts. And when we messed up, we would try to fix it. And so even parts that we wouldn't even see with the camera, it's like, that's not done right. We need to make sure that's done right. You know? So I think there's something to be said for honoring God with your craft. And when you honor God with your craft, I think other things, they will fall in place.
Yeah.
But that's just me, though.
Well, I think, you know, and I don't want to spend too much more time on this because we're going to run out of time real rapidly. But I would say, you know, did you ever watch that movie Parasite that came out just a couple years ago? I think it's a South Korean film.
It.
So I watched
it. Like subtitles.
Well, I don't like subtitles either. That's for sure. However, I can't put up with it. When I watched that movie, I noticed a few things. I thought this movie is extraordinarily meticulous in its cinematography and its planning. It was it was just overwhelming. Like, oh my gosh, they literally thought of so much in every frame. It's just astounding. I can't imagine the privilege of working on a set where you can literally think through so many elements on that movie. And I remember watching it thinking, there's elements of genius, like pure genius, the way that they're telling the story in that film. Now, that film is not at all a Christian, you know, quote unquote Christian film. But there's elements in it that I can look at and say they are trying to do something masterful in that. And ironically, I resonate with that. When I watch it, I'm like, I just find it astounding. I'm like, this is just amazing the way that they're doing story structure here. It's right on the money, like everything. And I could do a whole podcast just talking about this one film, just on the analysis of it, because it's so much. I would never do that with a God's Not Dead film. You know, there's nothing there to analyze. There's nothing there that I look at as masterful. There's nothing there that I think, oh wow, this is worthy of my time to really look at and be like, oh my gosh, they really did X, Y, Z. For them, it did a purpose. It did a goal. But for me, it kind of failed there. And so I think, you know, one of the ways you and I are so much alike is that we both have a passion for seeing something played out that is, we might not achieve masterful level, but we definitely want to. And we want to try to push the story, we want to drive it to where the story is doing the work for us and not trying to it's not just a ministry tool. I never look at any of my films like a ministry tool. I don't start out ever writing a script thinking, how am I going to make this a ministry tool? I write it like, what is a captivating story that would draw me in and hopefully maybe change me in some aspect or make me think like, wow, that was a ride by the time I'm done with it. So anyway, I bring that up just to say, like, I think that, and the crazy thing about Parasite is a lot more people saw Parasite than saw God's Not Dead, even though it's a foreign film. Precisely because it was so unforgettable and it was so noticeable. If you make something that is so creative and so well done that it's not forgettable, not noticed, people will notice and they will talk about it and they will discuss it. And maybe for me, what I took away from that is, if you're a Christian and you're making film, you should make something like that. Something that stops people in their tracks to say, oh my gosh, I cannot believe how just masterfully they have done this. And I haven't seen that come out of the Christian realm yet. So Anyway, I don't want to end there. We are already at 58 minutes in, but I want to end with a couple things. Have you learned any lessons from your time in film? And what would be like, if you had, like, let's imagine you have some new guy show up and he's like, hey, Chris, I'm coming. I want to direct films. I want to write films and stuff like that. Tell me what you've learned. What guidance would you give me? What would you tell them and why?
I would tell them that before you even make a film, you have to think about, like, what am I going to, let's just play a for instance, and let's say that the film is made and it's done and everything and went exactly according to plan. So what are you going to do now? You got a movie, but now what are you going to do with it?
So like distribution.
Yeah, how are you going to get people to see it? Like, if nobody sees it, what's the point of even making it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like they put so much time and energy into making something, but zero energy into knowing what to do with something that they've made. And so I would say that understanding the difficulty of distribution, the difficulty of, if you're thinking you're going to get into movie theaters, just don't think that thought at all. Like, it's not happening. You're not going to get your first movie, especially, you're not going to get it in movie theaters. It's very difficult. It's not easy to do. It's very expensive. You look at the budget of some of the most, like, let's say Paramount makes a film. I've seen different films that made by these massive studios, like, years after they were made. I didn't even know they existed. I didn't even hear about it. And they were in the theater. And I'm going, they put millions of dollars into online ads, ads anywhere and everywhere, billboards, anything you can think of. And I still have never heard of it. So what hope I got, let's say you have $100,000 budget into a small filmmaker. I know for me, if I had $100,000, I'd be excited.
Yeah, you'd be like pumped. Yeah, me too. I understand.
But then you blow through that 100,000 and then you've got no money to market this thing, to get it in front of somebody. And then, okay, so let's just say best case scenario, you get distribution. Now what?
Yeah.
Like when you got distribution for your series that you made.
Yeah.
You're like, this is it. Bollywood. We're in. Right.
Well, so, I mean, just not to throw. So I'm with you 100% on that. Like, I'm actually in the middle of working on a book all about distribution and the Christian realm and distribution, because I was asking my wife what she thought was the most valuable thing that I've learned and what is the most valuable thing I could give to other people that are like us in the space of film. And I think opening the world's eyes to the complete cluster cuss of distribution and what's going on, and how if you're a filmmaker, how you are just screwed before you start. And I don't want to say that. I'm sure somebody's out there like, oh my gosh, she said the word screwed. Yes, I did, because you are. And you need to understand what's happening. And I feel like that's the most valuable thing I could give to any audience, is an understanding of, I've had the privilege of I have 4 different distributors at this point. And so I can easily talk about the contracts and elements of it. But I think that for me, that is the area that is least talked about, and yet more people want to know about it. And I always get that same thing. I'm sure you do too, that, you just need to start with a good story. And then you just take that pill and swallow it. And then the rest is there's just so much that goes into that. I need to spend, I realized I can't even just tell you everything in one podcast of the distribution angle. But if I was like, I don't know if you saw this a few weeks ago, I posted a Facebook, it's probably been a couple months, I guess, but I posted a Facebook comment one night. I almost never do. I can't post anything on Facebook without somebody jumping on there and immediately taking the high road to say, here's the ways you're wrong. So I almost never use Facebook, period. But I posted one night and I was just like, I'd had it. I reached out. I was like, if somebody had told me, if I knew what I knew now 10 years ago, I never would have done any of this. And I think people were like, oh my gosh, he's calling out for help. He's probably suicidal. And so they started sending me all this stuff. But I think it's somewhat true. I think knowing what I know now and knowing where everything goes and how it works now, having spent so much time and effort and energy in learning it, I honestly don't think I would do it the same way for sure. I know I wouldn't. I would go a totally different direction. And so maybe I can share that at some point with somebody else and tell them what I would do differently.
I remember that post, and what did I say? I said,
I don't remember. It's my most commented post at all time.
Yeah. I said, let me join you and we'll quit together. Everybody else is going, keep going.
Oh my gosh. Like, nah, no, when you beat the workhorse, like, the workhorse is dead, guys. It died a long time ago. There's nothing left to beat. It's just like, it's given up. It's over. It's in the mud and done. Anyway, I still have
the hard part about it is that even when, and I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, I was hired as a script doctor, and I called you and I was like, hey, I've never done script doctoring before, but I understand how stories work. So I want to do this. What do you have? So I did it. I got paid, but then I was hoping that I was debuting for the directorial option to be able to direct this film. Yeah. Right. It wasn't a film that I really liked. It was like a teenage kind of film, and it was really boring. But I thought, well, this is an opportunity to actually make money as an industry and to do something, and maybe I'll learn something in the process about production. I'm sure I would have. But then they turn around and then they hire some woman over me. And then I got really bitter about all of that. And not that she was a woman, I don't care about that part, but just the idea that you're always getting passed over.
Yeah.
It always feels like it doesn't matter how good of work you're producing, no matter how much time and effort and energy you put into something, there will always be a cousin or a friend of a friend or somebody who will get the job and you won't, yeah. And even if they're not qualified, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Even if they have less experience than you and then they're getting hired. And I think the nepotism is something to be expected. I didn't realize how bad it was. And nepotism exists in every industry.
Yeah.
Not just in film, but it feels a lot worse in film. It feels like almost.
Well, I think it's generated from the stories that you hear of success. Because for me, and I'm sure you're like me, so if you rewind the clock back to 2003, you hear about the Kendrick brothers. They make this little crappy little film called Flywheel, and it does really well. It was horrible. I mean, as an indie filmmaker, you and I appreciated a lot what they did. I watched it. I'm the one who went out to Blockbuster, quote unquote, when that was a thing, and I actually rented it so I could see what they had done because I wanted to see it. But my problem is I viewed the Kendrick brothers as almost like a formula. All right, they're doing stepping stones. They showed that they could do something small, and that means they got a better chance, and that means they got a better chance. And then the next film was more and more, and now they're making $5 million films and stuff like that. And so that's what you have to do. Just show them that you can make something good, and then you can do it again, and then make something good with more money each time. And that's what I actually like. I think that went in my head as a truth that you could see played out here. And the reality is that that's a really faulty way of thinking and really not the norm. But because the Kendrick brothers were so kind of well known, that became at every conference, at everything that I would go to. It's all the Kendrick brothers. And now it's even worse. Now it's The Chosen, which not knocking the show itself, because I don't need to talk about the show. It better be good for the amount of money that they're spending on. It's millions of dollars an episode. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it should be good. But if you told me oh, well, you can raise $1 million for a show, no, you can't. Out of every 100,000 filmmakers who try to do what Dallas Jenkins did, it ain't happening. It's not for the other. It happens to one. I'm sure his name helped, and I'm sure his church helped, and I'm sure those the stars aligned just for that one thing, and that's great for that thing. But if you go into it thinking, oh, well, it worked for him, this formula could work for me, I don't think that would work either. And I think that kind of sets you up for failure right from the beginning, assuming that you can follow in these footsteps that are not really a great place to follow. I guess, I might be rambling.
No, I think you're right. Because the idea of, Dallas Jenkins, a lot of people don't realize Dallas Jenkins' dad, who he is.
Yeah, I mean, they're
Like,
only
they
like
don't realize
the
it.
biggest Christian film series of all time as far as books go that I'm aware
Yeah, I
of.
mean, I would probably say that the books were more popular than the movie, but yeah.
Oh yeah,
I
no, I'm
mean,
talking
yeah, they
about the
did have
books. The
Nicolas
movies were
Cage
horrible.
attached to it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what Christian film had Nicolas Cage attached to it? You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I
And he
did
didn't help. He
something.
couldn't save it.
He couldn't save it.
No, he
He
could
couldn't
not.
save it. It was terrible. But, I mean, the Left Behind series, his dad was, and you don't think that had connections developed over all those years of those books being so popular.
Yeah.
And he could literally just pick up a phone call and change, like he could change anybody's life with picking up a phone call. Like we don't have that.
Yeah.
That's not something that.
When it started
that
with
exists.
that he made a short film for I guess Christmas of the nativity scene.
Yeah.
But having worked in, I've worked in churches. No, it's not bad, but I've worked in churches my whole life, and I remember begging for any money to do anything. And most of the time, like if you got $100, you should be like, "Thank you very much for giving me a budget to make a film." Like $100 was like something. And I've been working in churches forever, and the idea that somebody would be like, "Hey, here's a bunch of money to go spend on a nativity story for Christmas," that. That again, it's not that there's anything wrong with that for his situation. I'm just saying to duplicate it, to think that that's going to happen to you, you shouldn't think that way. I think you should be smarter and realize that these are one and done scenarios that happen to particular people. And it's great that it happened to particular people, but if you go into it thinking it's a formula to follow it, you're going to be horribly disappointed in the end. So that would be my take on that. So
I was thinking about it today. It's funny because like I'll think about I'll start thinking about film. Like I won't think about film for a while. I mean, I'll just enjoy like finding good films and admiring other people's work. And then I'll get into these like moments, where you're like thinking like about all the choices that you've made as a filmmaker. And you're like, if I would have made this choice, would it have changed anything over this choice? That kind of thing. And I was thinking about today, and I was just like, maybe I should just be like content to just make fun stuff and pretend like nobody's ever even going to see it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like because it's like, I was actually asking somebody the other day, I was like, it's just getting passed over. You're always getting dunked on by other people. Like you're like, when someone comes along and that has like an opportunity like Dallas Jenkins could come in to anything that we're trying to accomplish and dunk on us every single time, right?
Right.
No question.
Well, when you have millions of dollars, it's kind of easy to do that. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is that when I started thinking about it, I was telling someone online, I was like, I'm a creator, and I only feel fulfilled when I'm creating, is what I told her. And then I started thinking about that statement that I made. And I'm like, what does that really mean? Like, should I be content with just creating and just doing what I can do? You know what I mean? I have cameras, I have lights, I have people who would be willing to get in front of a camera. I could do this stuff for $0 and just always be making fun stuff. And just be like, throwing it up on YouTube, and who cares what happens to it? I don't care if I make money off of it. I'm enjoying I'm just enjoying being a creator.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds like romantic, and it's easy to kind of forget the fact that, well, you still have bills that you've got to pay. So you would have to do this as like a side hustle, or you'd have to do this as like something that it's a hobby. Some people go fishing on the weekends. I make films on the weekends, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I think going into it with the expectations, I'm not saying you don't shoot for I'm still talking to the guy you told me that just got into the industry.
Yeah.
By the way, this is a very long answer to a very short question.
Yes.
He just got in here.
He's like, oh my gosh, I opened a can here. I had no idea.
So it's like, I mean, but I have like a lot of existential opinions on like, well, why did I even start doing this to begin with? What did I think I was going to do? Like, did I go into it with even a game plan, or did I just go into it because it looks fun? I think somewhere along the way, it's very easy to lose sight of that just being creative and doing creative things for the sake of creativity is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
And you're not a failure if you're doing these things, but you never actually make a budgeted film. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
maybe that's what I would say. That's probably what I would say. Like that would be the summary. I forget all the other stuff I said earlier about distribution. So we'll just focus on this part, because as long as you're like getting better at what you do, there's nothing to say that someone might not notice you at some point. To enter your films into film festivals if you can afford it. Yeah, I'd say do it. It's fun. Just go there to have fun and go there to meet other people. Like I had a buddy on Facebook the other day say, "Hey, I'm shooting a short film in March. Does anybody want to come and hang out?" And I'm like, I'm not going to get paid for it, but yeah, I'll go hang out for a day and shoot with another filmmaker and enjoy being with somebody who understands the struggle that I'm going through.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really it, is like, just enjoy learning, enjoy creating, and the rest of it can just, be a bonus if you get to that next level, I guess.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I did go ahead and submit my latest film into ICFF again. So if all goes to plan, maybe I can come out to Florida. We can hang out and film something. I don't know.
You talking about the one that I couldn't track? Is that the one?
The sheer pandemic one? Yes.
with the windshield, dude. I don't know. I could not track that, dude. I was trying to track that handheld, and I'm like, why didn't he just lock off the shot?
I know, you would think, again, I mean, we could talk about that, but in the end, it doesn't matter. Like for me, that's exactly, I made that film for exactly what you just said. The pandemic hit.
I felt like I failed you though, dude.
Oh, you didn't fail me.
I didn't get it tracked. I had spent so much time.
I mean, I did it in 5 minutes, but it's all good.
Come on. There's no way you did this.
No, I'm just screwing with you, man. There's no, I can't remember. I definitely try. I mean, I wanted it to look good, but for the audience, for if you don't know, there are some scenes where there needs to be bullet holes hit a window of a car in this film. And I asked Chris to motion track these bullet holes onto the car. And it turned out to be a lot more tricky than planned because the camera is handheld and there was no markers on the car to really show that. So anyway,
there was markers on the car. You had tape on there, so you were.
Well, there was tape, but it was not easy. Like it was not an easy thing. There's a lot of movement.
The problem was the reflection of the trees in the sky on the windshield were preventing the tracker from being able to determine where the tape was, because there was too much data that was throwing off the track. the trees, as he was moving the camera, the trees on the windshield was also moving, and it was just the computer. My software was like,
I ended up literally tracking it by eye, by hand, every single frame, which was super obnoxious. And fortunately for everyone, this is not an After Effects podcast, so we're gonna wrap it up. Chris, I want to thank you so much.
It was a funny scene, though. I can say it was a funny scene.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. It was funny.
But I still haven't seen it, but when I get to see it.
Well, so it went on YouTube. It went on YouTube for like 2 days. And then I don't know if it's a mistake yet. I'm kind of feeling like it might have been a mistake. I went ahead and gave it to a distributor who really wanted the film. And I did it because I thought it would be a nice way to pay my actors back for what they had done in the film. Might be the fastest way rather than try to monetize YouTube. That was my thought. Now the distributor has taken it and has put it in it. They put it out, but I don't really know if they're actually doing anything with it. So I don't know. I might have been better just leaving it on YouTube.
It's going to be in the.
It's on Amazon right now, and then it's on. I submitted it to ICFF. I only did it because I was like, any chance to come to Florida and hang out with you would be fun. So I was like, I'll just do it just for the heck of that. So hopefully we will see it. But anyway, I'm gonna wrap it up, dude. Thanks so much for coming out and doing this with me. I appreciate it. I know it's your Thursday night, but it's awesome. This has been the Chason Laing podcast. You're gonna find the relevant links from today's show in the show notes. I'll add all of Chris's stuff in there so you can follow him, and you need to because he's awesome. Please look up his forward film. It's super cool. The set design is top notch. Like I'd put it up there with anything. Please, if you like the show, please hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell to be alerted when the next episode drops. And if you have any questions for myself or Chris, just drop us a comment in the space below and we'll get back to you for sure. That's all for this episode, folks. Go get after it.